SpellForce Conquest of Eo is the 16th or so release in the pretty popular but probably still underrated SpellForce series. Instead of an RTS RPG hybrid as was SpellForce 3, however, Conquest of Eo is an interesting blend of turn-based strategy, tactical hex-grid combat, and role-playing elements, all of which adds up to an experience not unlike Heroes of Might and Magic. Fans of that franchise know how long a campaign can take, and I'm equally excited/exhausted to report that Conquest of Eo is no exception. Indeed, after 20 or so hours with the game's preview build, I've barely made it into what feels like mid-game, and I am loving almost every minute of it. So if you'll permit me a few minutes of my own, I'd like to put SpellForce Conquest of Eo under the microscope and show you what this game does very right and what I'm hoping to see it do less wrong by full release in 2023. As you've probably surmised by this point, SpellForce Conquest of Eo is about conquering Eo as a pretty powerful and pretty pissed off mage who early on, and regardless of the starter path you pick, finds their way into possession of a book of spells and a floating castle. Well, I suppose that's a little generous, as your spellbook or grimoire is empty on receipt and your tower is less a majestic teleporting Castlevania castle and more a dusty disabled piece of shit. In order to get it off the ground, you'll need to accrue quite a bit of gold to hire and maintain an army, mana to then cast army-enhancing spells, research points to unlock new spells, and most importantly, all fire. A sort of omni-resource you can convert into mana, research, or mastery. Mastery levels up, literally, your tower, and with it, you. All the way from baby mage to big boy mage. With each new mage level, your tower's domain radius increases, you unlock new types of rooms for construction, and you can add additional heroes to the battlefield. These powerful units, each of whom has a personal quest, can then build their own lodges throughout the land. Lodges contribute to your domain's area, so any resource they encompass, wherever they are, will add to your resource totals for each turn. If at this point you're feeling a little overwhelmed by the game's impressive list of non-combat mechanics, rest easy. The game actually does a great job of introducing new information through its largely skippable tutorial, and things then stay quite intuitive for the campaign's duration, in no small part thanks to Conquest of Eo's wonderful UI. It's responsive, it's helpful, it's easy on the eyes, and outside of not being able to increase this the microscopic text size, I don't have a bad thing to say about it. That's not quite the case for the game's combat, however, as at least this far into the game, most fights feel pretty much identical. Your quote stack of units spawn on one side of a small map, the enemy at the other. You'll then maneuver to exploit the shitty AI and, barring insurmountable odds, win. There are a decent number of buffs, debuffs, and unit abilities to learn and employ along the way, but it just never adds up to anything particularly fun. Worse, I don't think I ever lost what the game predicted to be even a decisive defeat, but because the auto-resolve function thinks you're as dumb as is the AI, you won't be able to skip many battles. This, in addition to the lack of a replay battle button, hurts Conquest of Eo's playability. Instead of forcing players into save scumming, maybe just add a Control-Z function by full release, please? Please. Luckily, there's an awesome variety of enemies on display here, and the map is so large and environmentally varied that exploring it and unearthing its many procedurally generated charms is a true delight, so consider me currently amazed by Conquest of Eo's rich world and impressed by its objectives. In addition to the main quest, there are dozens of at least mildly interesting side quests scattered about the land, and they changed based on, for example, the hero you use to access them, the items in your inventory, your standing with opposing factions, and the type of mage you pick to play at the beginning. On that subject, the alchemist can brew potions to aid you in battle, the artificer crafts glyphs to do the same, but because hiring new troops typically takes so freaking long to do in this game, far and away my favorite mage was the necromancer. With its ability to summon cheap undead scouts, I was able to get further in an hour with the necro than I did in 5 with the alchemist, on an easier difficulty level in an easier starting location. Not that your story will change much regardless, so consider me neutral on these micrometrics. If they add voice acting or again a mother-hecking text slider to the final release, I'll be tempted to give the dialogue a 4 as it's well written if sporting the odd typo. Finally, some rapid-fire thoughts on style. Conquest of Eo is a visually charming game, and I never got tired of looking at it, though its visuals lack a wow factor unlike SpellForce 3, which is 5 years later still one of the prettiest RTS games I've ever seen. The music, meanwhile, is pretty plain here. Standard fantasy adventure fare, and the sound effects are okay save the hilariously bad footfalls. In the end, Conquest of Eo is an enjoyable experience that's likely to delight turn-based strategy fans. I'm giving it a subject to change aggregate megascore of 3.57 out of 5 and look forward to updating this opinion closer to full release. Until then, this is Scope, and happy holidays!